Apologies, folks. We've had some major login issues this morning. We all got bombed out of StreamYard at one point and not being able to get back in, so I do apologise. The comments will obviously come up on the right, but I can't bring them up because I'm not logged in, so apologies. Ash, how are we?
I'm very, very well, thank you. And I have to say, the chat has been on fire. I have been entertained for the last 10 minutes. So well done, guys. Sorry we're late, but thank you for keeping the entertainment going.
Absolutely. Yeah, as I say, apologies, folks. It was login details. I couldn't get in, obviously, because we were bombed out a good while ago. So we are here now. So apologies. And yes, you're quite right, Multiple Man. It is this afternoon, not this morning. It was nearly this evening, Ash. It was nearly this evening, but we made it. So here we are.
What a first time. Sorry to interrupt you. What a first time for us to do a pod together. Sorry, guys. It won't happen all the time. We're not a bad combination. It's just the way it's worked out today.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's went Pete Tong, as they say, but we're here. So obviously we're here to speak about the impending signing of Max Aarons. I don't really know a great deal much about this guy, Ash. I know he's obviously been at Norwich and other places, and obviously he's been at Bournemouth and was on loan, I believe, at Villarreal, was it, or Valencia?
Valencia, yeah.
Valencia. Yeah. So I don't really know too much about him. I'm kind of hoping that this signing will hopefully see the end of a certain player, because obviously we've been begging for that for a while. But the problem you've got with that is he won't be able to produce the numbers that the captain did over the previous years. So there's going to be some adjustment in this sort of lineup squad, isn't there?
There is, but if I'm honest, I'm really excited about Max Aarons. I think there's maybe a little bit of a narrative around him that he's coming to us to be fixed, and I think rightfully fans are maybe rolling their eyes at that a little bit because we've had too many projects in recent years where we've taken people in that have been on a bit of a downturn, and the hope is that we can turn things around. Whereas I think for Max Aarons, I mean, at one point he was seen as a star of the future. 3 or 4 years ago he was tipped heavily to make it into the England squad. And there was the likes of Tottenham and Everton sniffing around him. I think what's happened is he just made the wrong move after Norwich. I just don't think Bournemouth has worked out for him. I don't think he was given the opportunity to kind of show his qualities there. Might have been a disagreement with the manager. It might have been tactically he just didn't fit with what he was looking for. But when I look at the qualities that he potentially brings, it's very much reminiscent, and sorry, this is a lazy comparison, but it's very much reminiscent of what Tavolfer does in his heyday. Athleticism, attacking intent, getting up and down that wing. So yeah, I'm excited. I think the right side of the pitch needs a lot of work, given Tav's not what he used to be and Czerny is gone. So there's a lot of production on that side of the pitch gone. But I think Max Aarons actually should be a really good fit for us, and I'm excited if we can get it over the line.
Absolutely. And I mean, is this a classic sort of a Russell Martin sort of player? He's looking for that athleticism. He spoke about guys working hard and doing all the dirty work and getting up and down the pitch. This seems to fit that sort of mold, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that speaks in his favour is that he's very good on the ball. He likes to go on the outside up the wing, but he's also comfortable driving inside as well and taking a man on. And one thing I think one of the many things we lacked last year was around that pace and athleticism. I think we were very slow and ponderous, and I don't think we gave opposition teams a lot to think about going the other way. I think we were really easy to play against at times, whereas I think Max Aarons kind of resets that and is a player that can cause opposition problems. So very much fits in the mould in terms of what I think Russell Martin wants to do, and I think will be an upgrade on where we are just now at right back. What it does do, as you've highlighted, is throw up an interesting conundrum around what do we do with Tav, because he's club captain, he's a big personality, he's not used to not playing games. So I think at the moment, looking at our centre back options, it probably makes sense we might see him in there, which may or may not please people. I don't know.
I mean, going by obviously the first few pictures that we got for pre-season, it does seem as though the players are getting worked extremely hard. There was a lot of them sitting on the ground, blowing out their backsides pretty much. I love to see that stuff. I don't know about you, because that for me is this is the groundwork for the season, isn't it? Pre-season, it's so important And this is the sort of time as well where you can build up all the strength and all the muscles that hopefully, and I say this with bated breath, hopefully injuries are minimised.
Absolutely. And I think, the pictures you're talking about, the one that I remember is Danilo, who looks like he was questioning all of his life decisions that he'd made to that point that brought him back to Auchenhowie on Monday. So, no, I like to see it. I like to see them getting worked. I mean, when Martin was asked about what his plans were for pre-season, I think that's the first thing he said was, I'm going to work the players. Because I think we lacked, as not to repeat myself, but the athleticism, etc. I think we really struggled with that. There were teams I felt like were fitter than us at certain points of the games, which isn't acceptable given the facilities and stuff that we have. So no, I like to see that. I think it'll just be interesting what happens when the rest of the squad come back. Because obviously one of the things I get frustrated with is you hear so often midway through the season players that maybe miss pre-season saying that, pre-season was such an important base layer and I missed it and I'm really playing catch up. So that's where, not to take it back to John Suter, but that worries me a little bit about him because he's not going to have the same base layer as everyone else. But you're right, the fundamentals are laid down now, particularly when you've got a new manager coming in. Pre-season is really important. And let's hope we get as many players through the door as quickly as possible so they get the chance to participate in that and they're not playing catch-up if they arrive later in the window.
Yeah. I've had the belief that signings have been lacking recently purely because the EGM hadn't happened. Now the EGM has happened. Are you expecting just like a domino effect? Just all of a sudden, we're just going to see signings piling through the door purely because now that the EGM is out of the way, the board have the sort of the thumbs up from the shareholders now to to do what they want. And I've always felt that this EGM was obviously it had to happen because obviously the shareholders had to give everything okay. But do you think that was hindering the sort of future signings coming in the door?
I think it's a fair point to make. I think, it potentially could have been. I mean, I know that it was a foregone conclusion, but there are certain procedural things that you do have to go through. I probably felt like it might be more to do with just the timeline that we're operating on versus other clubs. We obviously have players back at pre-season. A lot of clubs, particularly down south, don't. I mean, there's teams down south still playing in last season's tournaments of the Club World Championship. They've not even had a break yet. So no. I think that it could be the EGM, but I think it could potentially also be that, we're in a rush to get players through the door, but other clubs are maybe wanting to just hedge their bets a bit. Who are they going to bring in to replace players that go? Are they going to get the best deal dealing with us now, or do they want to hold off and see what other options are available? So I suppose it's almost like, I think when one or two start to happen, it'll be a catalyst, but I think we just need these one or two in the door and out the door to probably start moving things along. But time is starting to get I'm a wee bit twitchy. I'm a wee bit disappointed that we've not had more players in the door, but from the sounds of things, we have got some action imminently about to happen.
Absolutely. And Lyndon, don't worry, you're not going to get shortchanged today. We were obviously 15 minutes late, so we will extend by 15 minutes because that is the fair thing to do, so don't worry about that. Another name, Ash, that's been obviously linked heavily is Connor Cody. Now, Connor Cody has played at the EPL for many a season with Wolves, Everton. Do you see that as an ideal signing in the sense that he brings experience? Seems a strong character. He's very vocal. Mm-hmm. I would, looking at it, obviously Leicester's in a serious bit of bother just now with financial difficulties. So would you, if money was, doing well, would you expect that sort of player to be coming up our way?
I mean, I definitely see the advantages in some respects. You've touched on it there, his experience, in different leagues with different teams in England. A lot of people talk about his leadership and his character. And I do think, if you think back to the likes of Liam Balogun, I'm not saying they're the same player because they've got different profiles, but, Liam Balogun was a leader in our dressing room, and I think he'll be a big miss this year from that respect. So we have to replace that. Somehow we've got a lot of young players in the squad. So Cody would fit the mould in that regard. Where I probably am a little bit hesitant is I think his partner will be really important in defence because he's not particularly pacey or athletic. I think he's comfortable on the ball and I think he's a good physical unit. But, if we're playing the likes of Celtic who like to get in behind and everything's fast and frantic, I probably wonder how he would hold up against that if he was playing alongside the likes of Suter, etc. Maybe someone like Enciala, if he had bit more experience or whatever, maybe that's a decent partnership. But NCL, I don't think is ready to be first choice centre back next year. I think he'll get more of a shout, but I still think that if Cody comes in, I'm okay. But we'll need to bring someone else in, I think, that complements his style of play, because if not, I worry would be a bit cumbersome at the back.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with is it Aeron's? I was corrected by the sniper earlier. I think it's Aeron's. It's pronounced.
Our apologies, folks.
I know. So Aeron's coming in, and potentially Cody. Is that kind of for me? Well, for me, certainly that is a bit of relief for me, because I've always felt the back five has been needing major surgery for quite a while. I've obviously with the Dessers chat, I always said that Dessers was the least of our concerns, but if a bid came in for him, then we would let him go. I've always said that the back five is our issue. A team like ours don't win leagues if the defense is playing like the way we are, because all good teams have good defenses. So I'm pleasantly happy that the fact that there's guys coming in now that are defenders, that are potentially coming in, I should say. And I'm just pleased that that's an area of the pitch that we're starting to address.
Yeah, and I think, you're right. The chat has been all about Dessers and about wingers, etc. And Martin and I had a chat about it on Friday. And in fairness, somebody commented in the chat saying, why are we talking about strikers? I don't think the striking issue is the biggest problem. It's the defence, because some of the goals we conceded last season were, laughable, really. Benny Hill theme tune music playing in the background to most of our highlights. So I agree. I think Russell Martin, obviously, people maybe need to be won over in terms of how good defensively he is as a coach, because that's not always been the strongest part of his coaching game. But it's good to see that he's immediately come in and been like, we have to make some changes here. We have to tear this up slightly. We have to get fullbacks that are comfortable going forward but can recover defensively as well, because we got caught out a few times last season. And clearly, when you look at our centre-back options, the likes of Proper and Balogun being gone, we're missing a lot of bodies in the middle of that part of the pitch. So, I'd like to think we're looking at the whole team, but I agree that if the first few bodies through the door are defensive recruitments, I'm quite comfortable with that. I think it's a sensible approach.
Absolutely. As I say, there's everybody speaking about Cody being sort of captain material and that, but the one player that I want to see given that role, obviously everybody will know my stance on this, is Nico Rasin. So there's obviously a bit of a conundrum with Rasin. If a serious bid comes in, like is being reported, 20 million plus, I don't think that's the sort of bid we can turn down, Ash. Even though we want him to stay and be a future captain, I just don't think that's the sort of cash that we can turn down.
Yeah, and I think it was a question that was posed to the chaps at the EGM around, what do we do with Raskin? For example, if we get a big bid, will you take it? And he sort of alluded to the point where, well, that's really a test of our strategy early doors, because I imagine the strategy is to maximise your assets, reinvest in the squad, and move on to the next level. The reality is, we don't have a good track record of selling players at the right time. Raskin is a little gem, and I think we'll go on. I think the move he takes now probably will get a bigger move after that. I think he's that good. I think he'll develop at another club and then potentially get to a bigger club than the one he goes to now. But yeah, we need to have a few wins, if nothing else, I think, to say to other players that we're trying to sign, to say, look, guys, here's the pathway. Come to Rangers, have a good couple of seasons, and then we're happy to let you go as long as we get good value for you. And it might just be the bit that gets a few pieces of recruitment over the line. For example, Poku, you might have been going to talk about him, Brian, but you do wonder if he is now going to a championship club rather than us, if that is part of his decision making, that Rangers into the Premier League in terms of a pathway isn't really that well trodden. So that might be part of his decision making if he's decided to go QPR.
There is that, yes. I mean, we don't obviously know where sort of Puku sort of hails from. He might be from the London area and sees QPR as his ideal destination for his family. He might just see that as that's the way for him to get into the EPL. QPR going up. I mean, they've just changed manager. I think they appointed the new manager this morning. So it's a gamble from him in that sense, isn't it? Because it's all very well saying I'm going to join a club in the Championship to get in the Premier League, but we all know the pitfalls of the Championship. That is one of the hardest leagues to get out of, isn't it?
It is, and it's a shame because, and again, you have to kind of caveat all of this with, we don't really know who our targets are, really, because the club have been very careful, and it's quite it's frustrating in some ways because we all want to know who's signing, but it's refreshing in other ways that we're not, being linked with every Tom, Dick, and Harry, and we know exactly what's happening before it's announced by the club. So with the likes of Poku, though, I think there's been, and apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right, I'm sure someone will keep me right. There's been so much smoke around him that I think there must have been strong interest. And I think the easy thing to do is say, well, if he's signing for QPR, it's about money. Whereas, I just wonder, you're on the Premier League's kind of radar more if you play in the Championship. Yes, we have Europe, and yes, we can offer him, first team football. Some of these clubs down south wouldn't be able to do that. So there is that, but I just wonder if he thinks my chances of being noticed by a Premier League club increases when I'm playing in the Championship versus playing at Rangers, where, like I mentioned before, we don't have the best track record of selling players directly into the Premier League and being successful. So it's a shame if that one doesn't happen, because I was quite excited about his potential. Peterborough fans talk about him very highly, and his stats look good. So I think, again, on the right-hand side of the pitch, he would have offered something. So we'll have to wait and see, though, because nothing's done until it's done. But the noises are that he's decided to go elsewhere.
Yeah. When Graham Brown's just saying in the chat there, trust the new owners. I was very interested to their sort of chat in the sort of their after EGM sort of comments where they were saying that it was going to be very data driven, this, signing players. That is, for me, that's a polar opposite of what we've ever done, isn't it? This is us really starting to shift into a new sort of era where we're using data to sign guys, whereas a lot of teams have been, like, I think Brentford have been the sort of ones that have been doing it for a long, long time, haven't they? They've been basically using data and stats to back up their signings, and let's be honest, Brentford have been doing extremely well, so you can't really argue with that. So is this another nice shift in sort of a tact that the board are going to introduce to the club?
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact there is going to be a bit of emotional separation between the new owners and the club. That's not to say that they haven't fallen in love with the club or they're not going to fall in love with the club, but I do think they'll take kind of colder, harder decisions that maybe the previous board struggled to do because they had that fan connection. You look at, I know it's completely different, but the likes of the NFL, where obviously the 49ers, they're involved in that. These guys have huge scouting departments that look at data analysis for 3 or 4 years, looking at college players, analysing, their potential, and then they give these guys, 30, 40 million pound contracts straight out of college at 21 years old, guaranteed. So they put a lot of stock in that analysis evaluation piece. Now, obviously, the metrics that they're measuring aren't going to be something we can do for footballers, but there's probably a lot of learnings that they've gone through to develop their system that actually you could apply to some of the football scouting that we do. And obviously, Leeds have been a bit of a test case for that. It sounds as though they've started to change the way that they recruit players, and it is a bit more analysis led. So I'm entirely comfortable with that. I don't want to be too robotic. I don't want to take out people's ability to make their own decisions.
No.
But I think if people are given an evidence base to make a decision, and that's as robust as possible, it can only be a good thing for us and the success we have with targets in the future.
Certainly. Their comments, about moving forward with the club and, their reasonings for coming. I was very encouraged by that chat. The fact that they were, making their case that they're here. They're not here for the short term. They're here for the long term. They're here to, they're here to win things. Nothing, there's no honeymoon period. Effectively, is what the quote was. As you said before, I think it's marvelous hearing a board speak like that, or board members speak like that, because I think that's something that's been lacking for a good while now, is this urgency and this sort of desire to be the best team. I think that's been lost for the last few years. I think we've almost just tried to skate by and get by by the bare minimum. And I think this is another tack that the new board have come in, and they're not going to put up the second place. Second place is not in their vocabulary. So that is another thing, Ash, that really excites me, is these guys aren't going to mess around, are they?
Oh, and I think, the reality is, I think the previous board were almost like the introduction of Cat there. And the previous board, I think, were fighting almost season by season. I don't know if they had the ability to plan 3, 4, 5 years ahead the way that the new owners are going to be. And when you heard them speak at the EGM, there was no grand declarations, there was no promises in terms of we're going to win the title this year, we're going to turn Ibrox into a 100,000 seater stadium and, get the sports bar open. It was all very kind of grown up adult stuff saying, look, guys, our focus and priority is going to be on the pitch. That's where everything is geared to at the moment, to get the right people in the right positions in the football side of things, to get the right players on the pitch. But yes, we're aware of all these other kind of projects that are going on that we need to look at and invest in. So it was just refreshing. As I say, it was just adults in the room, saying the right things, but doing it from a place I think you could trust. You could trust what they were saying. And you could believe in there is a long-term strategy here. So it means that if Russell has a tough start, going to have to get behind them. These guys are not, the needle is not going to be moved in 6 months if we're not where we need to be. It is a long-term project, and that is a bit of a change as fans that we'll have to get used to. But it's got to be better than hitting the reset button every year, because that's got us nowhere. So patience will be required, I think.
Patience in Rangers fans isn't something that goes hand in hand, is it? Not really. No, she's just a long-haired Moggy, I'm afraid, guys. It's just she's just a long-haired grey cat, and yes, anything that moves, JD, spiders, beasties, anything that moves, she takes care of it. So she's a good hunter. So she's fine. Considering she's an indoor cat, she's actually a really good hunter. So no,
you're very lucky, Brian, because I have cats and I'm terrified of spiders, and not one of them. I actually go into a room where the cats are sitting and there's a spider cutting about, and it's just, you look at them and you think, what actually is the point of you? So I'm glad that your cat has read the memo and done the right thing.
Absolutely, she has. Anything that moves in this house, it gets investigated. So yes, she's very much in that mold. But again, going back to the board, again, it's typical when the press sort of or get a hold of this sort of 20 million figure, isn't it? They keep harping back to it, and you're like, come on, guys, you do better than that. That was never going to be the base amount of what they were going to invest. You know what I mean? It was always that. I almost wish they didn't put that figure in, because obviously they've latched onto it now. It also depends who leaves and money coming in. But I just don't think I don't think they're going to spend a silly amount of money, because I don't believe they did that at Leeds. So we've got to just sort of hang fire. I think they'll spend money, but I think they'll spend it wisely, won't they? They're not just going to frivol it away and just spend 8-10 million on somebody here and 5 million on somebody there. They're going to try and be prudent as possible, aren't they?
And I think that the 20 million thing is just an albatross that the media and other fans, want to hang around the owners' heads. I think it's a bit like we're going to be a sister club to Leeds. It's just to make other fans feel better about the takeover, because obviously people are a bit uncomfortable that things are changing for the better around Ibrox. So yeah, I think it's interesting though when they were asked about what the transfer budget is, that they kind of learned from that statement where they didn't mention it, because I think they've realised that although they thought it was harmless enough to put it in, it's now being used as, oh, well, they've only got 20 million. That's not going to get them far. Not going to compete with Celtic with 20 million. So, no, I think it's all dependent on, does Raskin go or does he sign a new contract? Does Egerman go? Does Tiamande go? Ridvan, etc. I think, these guys will reinvest funds that we get into the club and transfers back into the transfer budget. But I think what they were really saying is there is a transfer budget. We know we have to go and buy players. There'll be money there to do that. But we're not going to go and waste money on marquee signings to please the fans. We're going to do it with a plan in mind, and it's going to have to fit, what Russell Martin's system is, and also what the technical director and sporting director think are good signings for the club. So again, it's just like a more grown up approach, I think, to what we've done in the past, where we've maybe panic bought because our first choice player hasn't been available. We've just went and got someone else that maybe was a completely different mold of player, and that's just not sustainable.
No, definitely not. If you were. Who's under the most pressure at Rangers just now? Is it the board? Is it the sporting director? Is it the manager? Who do you feel's under the biggest scrutiny now? I think it's Thirlwell in some ways, because he's the man that's behind the signings and he's the one that's in charge of the purse strings. So I think Thirlwell's under the big pressure now. He's under he's got to deliver for the manager, because the manager's only as good as the signings coming in. Let's be honest. And if he doesn't get the tools required, he can't do the job. So I think Thirlwell's under serious pressure now to get a lot of these, because somebody else said in the chat, there's about 4 weeks till the Champions League qualifier. So I think Thirlwell's under a bit of pressure now to get signings in the door, doesn't he?
I completely agree. I think the board are fine because they've made all the decisions and they've backed up the decisions they've made, and you can see the logic in it, in terms of the managerial appointment. So I think board are fine. They've put the money in, etc. The manager, we've no frame of reference to evaluate him yet. We just have to trust that the good things we saw in his previous roles, Southampton, etc., that we're going to see those aspects at Rangers, and the more negative things he's had time to work on as a coach in the periods where he wasn't working. Thelwell is the one that's under pressure now, you're right, because I think we'd expected as fans to have seen more players in the door by now. And although Max Aeron seems close, or Aeron, sorry, that's about the only one that they seem to have gotten over the line. And by all accounts, it's a loan without, it seems, any option to buy at this stage. So I think he is under a bit of pressure. I've no doubt that they're doing a power of work behind the scenes and there's lots of irons and lots of fires. But I do think they need to get one or two over the line just to calm the anxiety down a wee bit, because I'm pretty calm, but I'm also looking at the clock and thinking we're eating into a lot of pre-season and these qualifiers are going to be right upon us. And what we can't have is what we had last season, which is we start the season on a low point. So we just can't have that. And sorry, Brian, your cat made an appearance, and my dog has now just made an appearance in audio form at the window. So sorry about that, folks. But yeah, no, Thelwell's got to get something happening pretty soon, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be the Rabble without an animal being on the scene, would it? I mean, Stuart's got his dog that just sleeps, seems to permanently sleep, and never seems to be awake.
So we're late, and we've had all the animals join us, guys. What a rabble for the ages.
Exactly. I see Egerman getting a lot of chat in the comments there. I mean, there has been murmurings or people claiming that X teams are interested in him. Do you think it would be more prudent for him to stick around and get a proper, like, last season was his breakout season, you could call it. He was signed last summer but didn't play for 3 months and then exploded onto the scene and everybody was wax lyrical about him. Do you think it would be more wise for him to stick around with us and get a good season with us, and then if depending on how he plays, if he feels that his future's elsewhere, move on? Because some of the teams that are involved in wanting them are they're not just sort of little teams, are they? They're big teams, and I don't think he'll get the game time at them like he would with us.
No, I think Egerman would be one if he sold this season. It might just be a season or two too early in terms of maximising his value. As you've mentioned, he didn't have a lot of professional football experience before he came to the club. He didn't actually start playing any sort of structured youth football until I think he was, much older than is the norm here. Being in academies from 6-7, that's not the way Egerman started his career. So I think he's got a hell of a lot of development. I think we didn't play him enough last year. I think we were a wee bit unfair towards the end of the season where we chose not to play him in games where actually the result didn't really mean too much as you can say that as a Rangers fan. It would have been better to give him more time to develop and adjust to the Scottish game. But the flashes we did see show that he's a real talent. And I would love to see him get a chance to be the main man this season. It depends on what we do from a striker perspective. It depends on whether Russell Martin thinks that he can fit in his system. And I suppose as well, with the loss of Chirai, the assistant manager, you don't know whether that influences Hamza's decision. Obviously, I know they were close and they had that connection from the under-23s Moroccan team. So whether that, plays a factor in whether Egerman wants to go and take a new opportunity. But you're right. I think you'll get guaranteed minutes with us this season. He's not going to go to West Ham, I don't think, and be a first-team choice straight away. So at his age and with his development where he is, I think he'd be much better playing a full season with us. And then hopefully next year we're talking more than £15 million, transfer value.
Absolutely. There's has been other names linked with us, but I mean, there's not as much noise as the ones that we've spoke about. So I'm not going to go into all those because we could be here all day, because as somebody said in the comments, we have been linked with every Tom, Dick and Harry under the sun. So we will just stick to those links. But news that came out yesterday that affected the women's team, Ash, that Joe Potter left. I think the sort of feeling within the sort of the guys that we do the women's pod with was that they felt she was going to leave, but the more time went on, they thought, well, maybe she's not, and then all of a sudden she did leave. So was that a bit of a surprise?
So a bit like you, I don't follow the women's football as closely as the men's, but I have obviously taken a bit of an interest. The way that the season ended last year was really disappointing. And, a cup double in most seasons as a Rangers manager is pretty good, irrespective of what group you're managing. But I think given the way we kind of capitulated at the end of the year, for the second time, I believe, I thought the club may have relieved her of her duties, if I'm being honest. I thought that might have been the case. And when I saw that she'd moved on, I kind of assumed that's what had happened. But I see that she's gone to Crystal Palace. So it sounds as though, they've actually come and got her, because she's got a very good pedigree. And she's won 4 trophies in 2 years. So there's not many, Rangers managers do that and would be considered as failing. So it'll be interesting to see what they do from a men's point of view. Probably not what Thelwell needed at this stage, because there's a lot of other things he has to focus on. So you do wonder how that will affect the dynamic of how they fill that role and what resources that takes away. But obviously you've got to give all parts of the club focus, and you can't ignore the women's team, because they've been very successful, and actually they've been more successful than the men. So you could argue that let's keep them going and keep them on the right pathway. But yeah, I think she goes with the best wishes of most people, but maybe just a bit of a sour note that she didn't get a league title.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, they're going to be playing more games at Ibrox. That's another bit of news that came out. So it's going to be that. It's going to be a very difficult one, that, isn't it? Because obviously, try to fit in with the men's team and fixture congestion. It's always going to be tricky, but they've made that commitment, so we'll just have to wait and see, won't we?
We will, but from memory, I don't think the women's record at Ibrox is very good. So you do wonder, is that just unlucky, or is that just maybe not being used to the environment? You think of the home advantage you get when you play in your kind of familiar stadium. So maybe the thought process is give them more access to Ibrox, increase the crowds, get more people involved, but also maybe make them more comfortable when the bigger games are at Ibrox. They don't feel so kind of a fish out of water. So yeah, I think as long as it doesn't jeopardise the pitch condition, because our pitch is fantastic compared to lots of other pitches around the UK, let alone Scotland. So yeah, good for the women's, I think, team to get more exposure and get more fans along. And I've been to a few games at Ibrox to watch them, and it is good, but they do need to turn that around and start to get some big wins, because it's pretty depressing leaving Ibrox after a women's game if the result's not going our way.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I think it was Paul was asking, just I'll scroll back. Yeah, Wilco will leave that Joe's left. Don't know. I really don't know. I mean, she's enjoying her football. She scored a barrel load of goals last season. I don't know. It's all dependent. I think, Ash, it's very much, same players. Do you think they'll stay or leave? It's all about how they are, and where what they're feeling at that club, isn't it? They're very. If they're playing all the time and doing as well as Katie Wilkinson did last year, you'd like to think she'll hang around, because she's scoring a lot of goals. She's enjoying her football. It is very personal, isn't it? You can't just say, "Oh, because our manager's left, the player's going to leave." It's because players are on contracts, so I would dare say she's got another year left. So it's a case of, Ash, if she's enjoying her football, surely you would like to think that she'll hang around.
Yeah, but I suppose finances might be part of it. It's not like the men's game where, players are already, unimaginably rich. And so, yes, you can become richer by moving to another club, but it doesn't really shift the needle that much. In the women's game, I know that there's not a lot of money kicking around Scotland. We've obviously not made the Champions League, which is a financial blow. And there does appear to be more money in, down south and in some of the foreign leagues in women's football. So that could all be part of it as well. But you obviously want to keep hold of your best players and build on the success, because, as I say, the women's team have done great in recent years, and they'll be sore after last season, how it ended. They'll really want to get that league title back where it belongs. So hopefully they find the right manager, and that all works out well. And would it not be nice to have a league double for the men's and women's team? That would be fantastic.
That would certainly kick off the new era nicely, wouldn't it? 2 league titles for both the men and the women. That would be superb. But that is us, folks. I've gave you an extra 5 minutes because I was we were late, so I thought, no,
Feeling bad.
I felt bad, so we've extended it by an extra 5 minutes. But that is us for today, and of course we're back tonight with the big Scottish football quiz with Connor hosting at 8 p.m. So join in for that. I know a lot of you quizzers are out there, always competitive. So join in at 8 p.m. I think Connor's the host tonight, and I believe Ian's in situ as well. So, or Hamish, should I say? He is in situ tonight. So sorry, Lyndon. I'm sorry. I can't do any more than apologise. I'm so sorry.
Forgive us, please.
It is what it is. It is what it is. I can't do any more, so I'm sorry. But thank you to Ash for holding on and not bailing too early.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure being on. I look forward to doing it again sometime.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thanks to everybody in the comments. Again, I am sorry for making you wait. Hope it was worth it. And hopefully you'll tune in at 8 p.m. with the big Scottish football quiz. And we'll speak to you very, very soon.